Brrrah! What's going on, spicy gang? Today you will experience 4 IDontWorkHereLady stories. Everyone needs to drop some spicy fires in the comments because this video is hot. And like this video if you're having fun with me, and let me know if you subscribe in the comments so I can show you some love. Congratulations Tanya for the comment of the day. Brrrah!
I hope everyone has a good day.
A bizarre morning at Sainsbury. So a little background before we go on. I work as a carer for people with autism and learning disabilities. On Sunday mornings after breakfast, I always take one of the guys I'm working with to the local Sainsbury's for him to buy snacks and cigarettes. Sainsbury's is very orange themed store, which is coincidentally my favorite color, and so I am wearing a couple of things that are orange. Strangely, Sainsbury's staff wear maroon tops with the name of the store written in orange. That is about all you need to know beforehand, so let's begin. As mentioned in the intro, I always take one of my guys to the cafe in Sainsbury's first for a cup of tea before letting him loose in the store to buy his items of choice. While he is doing that, I go grab a couple of energy drinks and wander into the house where books, magazines, DVDs, and a really crappy selection of video games are to be found. I have been in that aisle for several minutes and I decide to go and check how my guy is getting on with his shopping. I like to promote his independence and freedom of choice by just letting him roam free within the store. He's never any bother to anyone. As I am leaving the aisle I am in, a lady, who I will estimate was in her 50s, comes around the corner from the aisle that runs down the center of all the aisles. I see her lock onto me and approach me, and she asked me where she could find this thing with an Italian sounding name. I, having never heard of it, had no idea where to even start with this one. So I just say, "I'm sorry darling, but I don't work here. But you see those ladies wearing maroon over there?" While pointing at them, I am sure they will know where to find it. She responds by saying, "But you're wearing orange." And to be fair, she was correct. I was wearing a gray super dry jacket which has orange zips and pull strings on the hood, as well as a bright orange super dry logo on the back right shoulder. Under that, I was wearing a gray super dry hoodie, which had a strip of orange in the inside of the hood. But the most obvious thing is that I am wearing a bright orange beanie hat because it is cold outside and all. My response to that was just, "Yeah, I like orange." And with that, I just walk away. I cross the central dividing aisle and walk into the aisle that is directly opposite the one I had just been in. I had probably only taken about 5 steps into the aisle when I hear from behind me a scream, or what might better be described as wailing and sobbing. I turned around and saw the lady I had just spoken to on her knees in the middle of the aisle. My first thought was that maybe she has slipped on something and twisted her ankle or something. I'm just about to go help her, but stop when one of the shop assistants came running from the aisle next door and ran straight up to her. I was still going to go over as I am a trained first aider. The assistant who went to her aid asked her what was wrong, and she looked directly at me, pointed me, and screamed that I had shouted at her and slapped her. My jaw just dropped and I thought, "You have got to be kidding me." More store assistants show up and they quickly speak to each other, and one comes over to me and asks what happened. I'm just stood there stunned as this lady is going crazy and making a huge scene in the store. I tell the assistant that all I said was that I don't work here and directed her to someone who did, and that in no way touched her. Some staff were speaking into walkie-talkies, and soon the store's manageress come running through the store. The whole time I am protesting my innocence. The manageress approaches me and I tell her the same thing, in that I had in no way touched her. She informs me that because there was an allegation of assault, that they were obliged to call the police and that I would have to wait for them. This time, I saw my service user who had naturally come over to see what all the commotion was about, and I called him over to me and had to explain to him what had happened to. The store assistant wanted to calm things down by removing me from this lady's view. So me, my service user, and the store assistant walked down the opposite aisle and through the checkout, dropping off my guy's shopping basket at the customer service desk before sitting us down on a bench behind the checkouts. 3 staff remain with the lady, while the manager, who is on the phone, goes behind the customer service desk where she starts looking at CCTV. At this time, I know that I might end up having even more issues with my service user who seems really anxious, and I knew was probably going to get a lot worse as soon as the police arrive on scene. I took advantage the few minutes I had to calmly explain more fully to him what was happening and that I needed to speak to the police when they arrived. I explained that neither of us had done anything wrong, and then I was sure we would both be free to leave shortly. I asked him to just sit quietly and until then to not worry about anything. At this time, an old lady came through the checkout and came up to me and said that she saw everything that happened and knew I had done nothing wrong. I asked if she would be mind sticking around and telling that to the police when they got here, and she said she would be happy to. So a couple of minutes later, the police arrived in the store and were directed to the screaming mess flailing around on the floor. A male and female police officers went over to deal with her. From where I was sitting, I had a clear line of sight to her, and everybody in the building could hear her. Thankfully, the store had just recently opened and was not at all busy, but new customers were slowly trickling into the store to be greeted by the tantrum from hell. I could see that the male police officer seemed to be familiar with the lady, but he was having no success at calming her down. About 2 minutes later, another 2 police arrived on scene. Yet again, a male and female. They were met at the door by the store's manager, who directed them to the screaming lady and also turned and pointed at me. The male officer turned and looked at me, and I raised my hand slightly to acknowledge him. The female officer goes over to join her colleagues, and the male approaches me. So this officer comes over, and I explain to him exactly what I explained already in this post. After I get through telling him, he takes a somewhat accusatory tone, saying that if that's all that happened, why is she acting that way? And that something else must have happened. I told him no. I walked away and she just started doing what he himself could see her doing right now. I told him she had been like that for the last 10 minutes or so. At this time, this guy's partner wanders back over but does not say anything to me. She just stands there while I tell her partner about my service user who is sitting next to me. While I am talking to him, the old lady from earlier approaches the female officer and tells her that she saw everything and I did nothing wrong. Now, what really pissed me off about this entire thing is that she just dismissed her, told her she had it handled, and asked her to move along. I think this was wrong, and if I were to be arrested, I was certainly going to make a fuss about that when I am questioned. As the old lady goes off, the manager comes over to the same female officer and they both step away a little. I don't hear everything they say, but I did hear that the woman has previously been banned from the store twice before for causing problems. Then I hear her tell her that it's all on CCTV, and she lets the officer to the customer service desk. I breathe a sigh of relief. So, as she walks away, the first officer who came in and rushed straight to the alleged victim came wandering over, and both male officers have a very quick chat. Then he turns to me and says sorry for the inconvenience and that we were free to go. To be honest, that kinda took me by surprise. They had not finished viewing the CCTV yet, but this officer knew the score and knew I'd done nothing wrong. I said something like, "Oh, so we're free to finish our shopping." And he said we were, adding that the lady had a history of mental illness, which I already figured out, and that she does things like this from time to get sympathy and attention. Well, you didn't have to tell me twice. Actually, he did if you think about it. I stood up and said thanks and grabbed my service user and headed to the customer service desk. As I did, so the female officer came back around from it, and even though I did not see it, I know the first officer who was behind me waved her off from approaching me. I just smiled at her and walked right past her. All the time, this bloody woman is still screaming and going a game. I pick up the basket from the customer service desk and head straight for the checkout. Now all the coppers go to this woman, and even though I am sympathetic to the behaviors of this mentally ill person, I have to confess, part of me was thinking great, we get to watch her get arrested. I know, that's bad, right? But I am still a human after all. I can't help thinking that. Anyway, it does not matter as that's not what happened. Instead, 2 African or possibly Jamaican women show up and go into the aisle. Not long after, All three of them come out of the aisle with the two carriers using a technique I am very familiar with, called a double wrap around arm hold, and they just march her out of the store and into a car outside. We held back within the store while this was happening to try and prevent her from seeing me and potentially kicking off again. Soon after they left, so did the police. Once everybody was gone, me and my buddy walked home, talking about it all the way. When I got back, I told my manager what had happened, mainly because I had to tell the police where I worked. So really to give her a heads up, so if anybody did get in touch, that she was not left completely in the dark. My manager thought it was hilarious and even tried to get me to write an incident report. But I argued that down because my guy was not involved in the incident. No, the job of writing that report lay in the hands of some other person in some other company in some other place, not me. Now my shift is over and I am back home. I still did feel like writing my story, but I prefer to do it for you folks here. If it does ends up needing me to write an incident report, I can come back and copy and paste it from this page. Hell, I might just directly give them the link. That is quite a tell and definitely worth writing up at work. Why? Because you did an amazing job at keeping your charge protected from the situation and safe and happy through the whole trauma. Very well done. It sounds like you handled a very stressful situation like the pro you are. I hope your guy was not too bothered after it was all over with. And before we get to the next story, I just want to say thank you for listening, and if you want to support what I do here and want to get more of my videos, please consider subscribing so my videos can show up on your YouTube homepage and recommendations. That will help me a lot grow, and if you want to do an extra step, you can leave a like and even a comment. That will be awesome. Not recently, thank God. A few years ago, I used to work at a particularly soul-sucking branch of Starbucks in my hometown. A couple months ago, I was in there as a customer after my morning run, so wearing leggings and a tank top, not at all abiding by the Spucks employee dress codes, and ran into a guy I used to know in high school who was working as a barista. We were never particularly close, but he was one of those friendly with everyone types, and we'd had enough classes together to recognize each other years later. We chatted a bit and he asked if I had not used to work at the location. I confirmed that I did and asked how he was enjoying it. We exchanged commiserating knowing grimaces, and he makes a comment about how working at Starbucks is. Well, you know, suddenly, another customer pops up behind me, and with a glint of unholy delight in her eyes, asks super enthusiastically if I work there. Normally, it seems like it will not be that weird to ask someone if they work in a place if you overhear them talking about the experiences working there. But something about how excited she was at the prospect really unnerved me. I truthfully said I used to, and she seemed even more thrilled. So I quickly sent an "I'm out, peace" look at high school dude and zipped out of there before she could corner me. Looking back on it now, she seems like one of those customers who thinks that regulars are actually friends with their baristas and is desperate to develop that kind of relationship. She might have seen me as an insider or outsider that could help her bridge the gap or something. Pro tip: even if your barista knows your name and your drink order on site and starts making it before you get to the register, you're not friends, you're a customer, and they are required to be polite to your face while they are on the clock. Sorry if this was unclear, but people in service are absolutely allowed to become friends with their customers. I was only saying that customer service does not automatically equal friendship, and for a lot of people, the distinction can be difficult to see. As many people have commented, if your server is actually friends with you, you will know. I have another pro tip: if they give you free stuff from time to time and have small talk with you, this might be another indication that you guys are friends. No, I don't know where the Uggs are. I am shopping for shoes with my mom at a shoe store. I am running around getting her different sizes because I am a good kid. A middle-aged woman stops me within earshot of my mom and says, "Do you know where the Uggs are?" I say, "No, I don't know where they would be." "Well, I don't know either." "Okay, I don't work here, ma'am." "But you're looking at shoes. You should know where they are." At that point, I just walked away because what can you do, right? If she pulls that again, threatening to get her manager. Why can't more people be this decent? I was at a thrift store today and had this 4-sentence exchange. "Excuse me, do you work here?" "No, sorry." "Oh, pardon me, Dan. Have a good day." "Thanks, you too." If more people were like this subreddit probably will not exist. I just want to say thank you for posting this story. It was absolutely riveting. The highs, the lows, incredible. Hey, check out more IDontWorkHereLady stories and look at other nice videos I made for people just like you that enjoys Reddit stories. To support what I do here, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment such as a fire. My name is Spicy, and I'm out.